Hello guys, this is Real Recaps. In this video, I will talk about a 2015 crime thriller film, Landmine Goes Click. Before we start, I hope you will like and subscribe to the channel. The film begins with a truck slowly ascending a hill in Georgia. Inside the vehicle are three individuals heading out for a hiking trip, Chris and a couple named Daniel and Alicia. Upon reaching their campsite, Daniel is the first to step out of the truck to survey the area, while Chris and Alicia remain inside. Chris seizes this private moment to whisper to Alicia about revealing their secret relationship. However, Alicia, visibly torn, expresses regret and hesitation. She confesses she does not want to marry Daniel on the upcoming Saturday but is equally reluctant to disclose their affair. Their secret and ongoing relationship behind Daniel's back has created a heavy tension between them. Once Daniel returns, he encourages the group to begin their hike. They follow his lead, trekking through scenic but rugged terrain. As they walk, Daniel recounts the area's history, explaining that the peak they are headed toward was once a battlefield. He warns that the land is still dangerous, with hidden landmines buried during the conflict. Despite the ominous history, the group continues, marveling at the surrounding natural beauty. Night falls, and the trio sets up camp. They light a bonfire in the center, its warm glow casting flickering shadows as they relax under a star-filled sky. Amid the light-hearted atmosphere, Chris jokingly pronounces Daniel and Alicia as husband and wife, eliciting laughter from the group. Later, Daniel and Alicia retreat to their tent, sharing a joyful and slightly intoxicated moment. As Daniel begins to undress, he kisses Alicia, but she asks him to close the tent flap, concerned that Chris might see them. Outside, Chris, still tending to the fire, appears visibly upset as he watches the couple from a distance. He eventually extinguishes the flames and heads to his own tent. At dawn, Chris is awakened by the sight of a man loitering near Daniel and Alicia's tent. Sensing something unusual, he carefully exits his tent and approaches the stranger. Confrontation ensues, and Chris ends up in a physical altercation with the man. It is only when Alicia and Daniel arrive from a distance that Chris learns the man is Devi, Daniel's friend and a first responder for trekking emergencies. Embarrassed by his misunderstanding, Chris apologizes, and the tension between them subsides. Devi soon retrieves Alicia's camera, offering to take a photograph of the group as a keepsake. The three hikers pose together, following Devi's instructions to adjust their positions for a better angle. He directs them to step slightly to the left, where the view is more picturesque. However, as Chris moves, he suddenly steps on a landmine buried beneath the surface. Devi immediately freezes, warning Chris not to move under any circumstances. Panic sets in as Alicia and Daniel realize the gravity of the situation. Devi assures them he will fetch help from the nearest town but warns that it will take approximately 4 hours. Despite their desperation, Devi leaves to seek assistance, prompting Daniel to yell after him in frustration. Left alone, the three of them struggle to manage their fear and anxiety. Alicia and Daniel retreat behind a large rock to discuss their next steps while Chris remains immobilized on the mine. In a moment of desperation, Daniel attempts to call for help using his phone. After pretending to reach an operator, he requests a helicopter and a team of landmine specialists. Once the fake call ends, Daniel reveals his true feelings to Alicia. He coldly admits he has no intention of saving Chris, confessing his knowledge of their affair. Alicia is stunned by Daniel's sudden outburst and tries to apologize, but her words fall on deaf ears. Daniel's temper flares, and he accuses both of betrayal, refusing to forgive them. Consumed by anger, Daniel gathers his belongings and leaves the group. He heads in a direction away from Devi but suggests Devi enjoy some beer and entertainment in the nearby town. Meanwhile, Chris and Alicia are left to fend for themselves, scrambling to devise a plan. Their predicament takes another turn when a local man named Ilya approaches them with his dog. Ilya listens as they explain the situation, but his initial reaction is panic. As they plead for his help, Ilya agrees but only on the condition of receiving payment. When Alicia and Chris offer money, Ilya dismisses it, claiming he has no interest in American currency. Instead, he begins making inappropriate demands, asking Alicia for her underwear as compensation. Reluctantly, Alicia complies, removing her underwear and handing it to Ilya. He sniffs it and seems satisfied, assuring them he will now help. Ilya begins digging a trench, following Alicia's instructions to make it 2 feet away from Chris and deep enough for him to jump into safely. However, as Ilya works, his bag begins to ring with a radio transmission. Chris and Alicia, desperate for outside help, urge Ilya to use the radio to call for assistance. Instead, Ilya delays, engaging in a casual conversation with his friend Sergei about soup. Frustrated by his lack of urgency, Chris lashes out, swearing at Ilya, which only angers him further. Ilya retaliates by threatening to abandon the task unless they comply with more of his demands. Alicia, desperate to resolve the situation, pleads with Ilya for the radio. However, Ilya insists she must perform additional humiliating tasks. He throws her underwear onto the ground and orders her to retrieve it like a dog. Humiliated but left with no other choice, Alicia complies. She gets down on her knees and crawls on the ground, retrieving the underwear as instructed. Ilya escalates the humiliation further by throwing the underwear again, demanding she carry it in her mouth this time. Alicia, though visibly angry and distressed, follows through, biting into the underwear and bringing it back to Ilya. Alicia uses Ilya's radio after he reluctantly allows them access, but the person on the other end does not speak English. Ilya offers to translate but, as always, demands something in return. Frustration and irritation build between Chris and Alicia, yet they decide it's best to rely on Ilya since he speaks the language and knows the area. However, Ilya proposes a twisted game. Alicia must remove a piece of clothing for each word he translates. Refusing to comply, Alicia angrily tells him to leave, insisting they no longer need his help. She takes up the shovel and begins digging on her own. Ilya, however, approaches Alicia again, telling her that Sergei, the person on the other end of the radio, is worried about her. He coerces her into answering the call, informing Sergei that she's fine. While digging, Alicia struggles to convey her distress due to the language barrier. Ilya exploits the situation, insisting she must strip for Sergei to confirm her well-being. Now fully in control of the situation, Ilya communicates in Georgian with Sergei, prolonging the ordeal while Alicia reluctantly complies with his demands. Alicia begins removing her clothes, but the disturbing game halts when Chris orders her to stop. Enraged, Ilya gathers his belongings and storms off. He warns them that Sergei is still discussing their predicament with him but expresses no further interest in helping. Consumed by anger, Ilya grabs his shotgun and points it at Alicia, who immediately flees while Chris shouts after her. Ilya commands his dog to chase her. In his fury, he vows to make Chris pay for everything. Dropping the shotgun momentarily, Ilya pursues Alicia, giving Chris a critical opportunity to retrieve the weapon. Chris seizes the shotgun and confronts Ilya, who has now taken Alicia hostage with a knife. A heated argument erupts between the two men, with curses exchanged. As tempers flare, Ilya's behavior becomes more erratic and violent, and he begins to harm Alicia. Chris hesitates, unable to pull the trigger, fearing he might accidentally shoot Alicia. Taking advantage of the hesitation, Ilya slips away, dragging Alicia with him to a secluded area. In a horrifying turn of events, Ilya forces Alicia against a rock, forcibly undressing her bra and pants despite her resistance. Helpless in the situation, Alicia endures unimaginable torment as Ilya repeatedly claps her. Her cries of pain and anguish pierce the air. From a distance, Chris witnesses the horrific scene, paralyzed with indecision. Though he holds a gun, he cannot bring himself to use it. As Ilya grows tired, Alicia begins to fight back, striking him on the head with a rock. Disoriented, Ilya stumbles as Chris shouts for Alicia to come to him. However, Ilya's dog charges at Chris, biting him and causing him to collapse. Chris loses consciousness briefly, waking up to find Ilya standing over him. Ilya smugly reveals that the landmine Chris had been standing on was a hoax all along, a cruel setup designed to torment them. Chris, now free from the supposed threat of the landmine, rushes to Alicia, who is gravely injured with severe cuts on her neck and bleeding profusely. As she lies in his arms, Chris desperately calls for help, but no one responds. Alicia's life fades away in his embrace. The scene shifts to a suburban household in Georgia, where a family comprising a mother, Tanya, and her young daughter, Lika, are busy with daily chores. Lika chats with her mother when an American tourist knocks on their door. Disoriented and seeking assistance, the man explains that his car's GPS stopped working and asks for directions. Struggling to understand Tanya's instructions, he inquires if they have an old map he can purchase. Tanya doesn't have one, but Lika offers to print a map from their computer, inviting the man inside. The tourist turns out to be Chris. After receiving the map, he asks if there is a nearby restaurant since he is hungry. Tanya explains there isn't one nearby and graciously invites him to join their family for dinner. Chris accepts the invitation, engaging in light conversation with them. Unbeknownst to the family, their home is near a bee farm where Ilya works. Hearing his dog barking incessantly, Ilya becomes curious and leaves his task to investigate. Upon arriving at the house, Ilya notices an unfamiliar boot at the doorstep. To his shock and horror, he finds Chris inside, dining and chatting with his family. Panic and rage consume Ilya as he retrieves his shotgun from the foyer. Chris follows Ilya outside and calmly informs him that he knows the gun isn't loaded. Seizing the moment, Chris shoots Ilya in the leg. Hearing the commotion, Tanya and Lika rush outside, pleading with Chris to explain the situation. Terrified, they comply with Chris's demands to move Ilya into a room and tie him up. Chris interrogates Ilya, demanding the truth about what happened to Alicia and the twisted games he orchestrated. Despite Tanya and Lika's desperate pleas, Ilya deflects responsibility, claiming he was drunk at the time. Enraged, Chris drinks vodka to prove his intoxicated state. Still, Chris rejects his excuses, becoming increasingly furious. As tensions escalate, Chris accidentally fires his gun, tragically killing Lika. Horrified, Chris stares at the lifeless body of the innocent girl, paralyzed by guilt and disbelief. Tanya screams in anguish, while Chris grapples with the devastating consequences of his actions. The movie concludes with Chris overwhelmed by the weight of his choices, haunted by the tragic cost of his vengeance. The end. Thanks for watching.